council, after discussion and executive came out, that I'm the one who made the motion that we move forward with the agreement not to exceed $100,000 and we get the revised contract, because what we were provided with was an interlocal agreement that didn't have a date, a term date in it, nor did it have the dollar amounts, and that's what staff was instructed to do. And you can read all the minutes, and I went ahead and put it in my memorandum so that it was in there, and business rocked along. Mr. Mayor, I do have to disagree with you on when I advised you of it, because I did keep the date down as I do everything, and it wasn't in April, it was in June. And Mr. Valenzuela, you stated that I mentioned it to you and talked to you about it in February. No, I did not. In February, January and February, I was still getting reports from various peoples in other cities that our involvement with the interlocal agreement was much greater than $100,000. I didn't come to you until June, after I had met with numerous occasions in opposition from the staff to view the transactions or anything referring to this, because I obviously didn't know enough when I was in Abilene, and the reason I'm certain of these dates is I've spent most of April and May in Abilene. I came back on election day, May 11th, before I was even back in town, so it was virtually impossible. I know I didn't phone you, I think my phone records would verify that, and I know when I sat down and talked about it, so those dates are inaccurate. After being told that by the attorney that the information has attorney-client privilege, I couldn't have it. No, you cannot have access to that information, or you have to request for information through executive session, and I am not prepared to give you that information. On numerous occasions, I was running out of trust. Why? Why could I not see simple transactions and information? I'm going to read Article 2.10 City Council in our handbook, and Article 2.100 of the City Council states in Section 2.120, investigations. The Council may investigate the financial transactions of any office or department of the city government and the acts and conduct of any official or employee, and that includes the city manager. Even though we do not have, the council does not have direct contact over the employees, we can report our findings to the city manager. But in conducting such investigations, the council person may control the attendance of witnesses, the production of books and papers and other evidence for that purpose, and may issue subpoenas. I was acting in my authority as a council member when I started asking to see these documentations. And time after time again, I was met with, you can't have them, attorney-client privilege. Now this came from the city manager, came from Michael Bain, and it also came from our city attorney. According to a question that I had asked Michael Bain, and he said those were the instructions from the city attorney, and the other time was instructions from the city manager. I have to ask why. Why couldn't I see them if it was an oversight? Why were you trying to stop me from seeing these items? It's perfectly reasonable and within my right as to our city charter, and it just didn't make sense to me. I also disagree with Mr. Valenzuela's letter and the mayor's comments to you that this happened on September 3rd, that they were going to talk about. If you look at the September 3rd agenda, the reason I didn't attend this second executive session, it was not on the agenda to discuss the actions with reference from. We were there and talked earlier with the attorney and the engineer with reference to the West Texas Partnership. After lengthy discussion and very heated and raised voices toward me, and why didn't I give this up? This was after Mr. Valenzuela gave us a letter on August 20th. August 20th, and at that council meeting, in his opinion, although the limit was surpassed, I see this as an oversight and not any willful negligence on the part of the administration. but no discussion, no alternatives of how we were going to deal with it, how we were going to apologize to the public, and what's most aggravating to me, where the monies were charged to. To pay this debt, the monies were charged to the water fund. And it's, somebody waved their hands back there. Those will know you're live today, the lights will come back on. But to charge it to the water fund, we have a 1/2-cent sales tax that states that money can be used for water exploration. And everybody up here, previous council, staff, they all know that. They had several opportunities until I gave a deadline that if I didn't hear something that it would be handled publicly, that I would take it to the DA. That is what TML handbook instructs you to do. When you have lost confidence or trust in your city manager or your mayor, you take it to the DA. I followed instructions. I'm sorry that it's a public deal. It's normal for the person that has blown the whistle, it's very normal to try to discredit them and make them the wrong person. I didn't sign these checks. I did not do the proper budgeting that it said in the first agreement that needed to be done. I wasn't the one who wasn't seeing to it that we got those budgets and that accountability and we had everything in there that we were supposed to have. All I did was blow the whistle that staff and the city manager are running the city without council approval. I've gone to great lengths. At first, this was called the interlocal agreement. And from January until March, April, May, I was referred to by numerous people from out of town saying the West Texas Water Partnership. And I finally asked in May, when I got back to town, I asked, what is the West Texas Water Partnership? Oh, that's the interlocal agreement. The name had even changed, and there's 2 more documents, agreements, that talk about the phase 1 and phase 2. And yes, you're absolutely right, Mr. Mayor. I would have voted to gone over that first phase, our share, to find water. I truly would. As long as we had the money and knew where to charge it out to. Phase 2, I didn't find out until September 3rd that that portion is going to cost $2.6 to $3 million. It is prudent on our part as council to know where the money's going to come from to pay for this. It is prudent for this council to know what we got in the first phase. And if you read the billings and stuff that are in there now, it was for all of the research to look at our water rights from Ivy and all the different places around that could get water to us. I have a file down here this thick that has been all of the research that has been done since 1951 to find water for the city. That we have paid for studies time and time again. I'm through paying for things that we don't get any action from, that we don't get any water from. We simply paid a repeat of all the information that we have had since long before I came on council. But at least I took the opportunity to read all of this research that councils have done before me. And yes, I wanted it public. And yes, I wanted the city manager to give us some sort of idea as to how we were going to prevent this from happening again. It's happened twice. The date order in which things happen is immaterial because both items shouldn't have happened. And there should have been procedures in place to begin with that it doesn't happen. On all of the things that we have done, whether it's the softball complex, the tennis courts, the swimming pool, you name it, every project, that amount, that cap is put into the computer and you know when you're going to get there. This project wasn't handled the same way. There could be lots of reasons, but I want those reasons explained to the people. And I feel only right to protect us from wrongful, it wasn't a dismissal, but for people in the past who committed the same sort of violation, whether it's apple or an orange, it's still spending money without approval. I don't want them coming back on us because we chose to look at twice the amount, but nobody got punished. I didn't ask the city manager or the mayor to fire anybody, but I wanted to see that this issue was dealt with properly and according to the laws. Call me whatever you want to call me, nerd or whatever, but I do read the stuff that is printed in our handbooks, our manuals, the TML, all of the guidelines that are out there for us to read and to know which ones we're violating. I just have to ask if any of the staff or anybody else is reading it. They're there for a reason, to keep these things from happening again. No wonder nobody trusts the government. Come forward and say, hey, I messed up. You know, I can forgive that a whole lot easier than I can all of these stalls and months that were going by and nothing was being done. The only one that was doing any work on it was me. And I've made it very clear from the very beginning, this sitting council minus 3 people weren't involved, didn't know anything. And I hate that for them at this time, but it is something that did happen and it needs to be cleaned up. I don't think that me, the whistleblower, should be ridiculed, punished, or talked down to, as I have been. And because I didn't feel that that discussion was properly listed on the agenda for executive session, and it wasn't. Anybody who attended and discussed this at that meeting, you need to look at the handbook as to what section of the state statute that you're violating and the penalties. $100, $500 is probably nothing to y'all, but a year in jail is something to me. That's not just the fine, that's if they wanted to so prosecute and go forward with it. And then I have to ask, what makes us think this is all? If this keeps happening, what else is happening? I've had faith and trust in staff members since I've been on council. And I am extremely disheartened that this has happened. If you're going to tell mistruths, if you're going to change minutes, and I can tell you I'm probably the only council member, and Ms. Ramirez knows this, in my laptop, I've got a copy of the agenda and the contents from every meeting since I've been in office. So for me to click back in my computer that nobody at the city messes with, for me to click back to look for some of this, and I come upon alterations or modifications in minutes, a year and a half, a year and 10 months, 2 years later. And I made it very clear in my notation, there possibly is a good explanation for it. I couldn't find one. And there very well might be. So I questioned Ms. Ramirez. She is allowed by law to make administrative corrections. And I did ask her, would you go back and correct something administrative a year and a half, 2 years later? She said, well, no, not normally. And the time of day that shows on my computer that these documents were messed with, midnight, 1 or 2 a.m. on a Sunday morning. So if we don't have a virus or we don't have somebody out there hacking into our system, somebody's doing it. But my computer goes home with me every night and doesn't go back to the city, so that the records can be changed in there. I'm just asking for explanations. It's an embarrassment. I don't appreciate people in high authority kind of twisting and turning the facts around to make it okay. Those dates are very, very critical in there. I couldn't have talked to Mr. Valenzuela when he said that I did because I was in Abilene, in a hospital. It just didn't happen that way, Mr. Mayor. And that's the reason I called you when I did, to tell you what I found, because that is the procedure that we're supposed to do. And then you didn't act on it. You didn't even include me in anything that you may have found out about it. Totally closed off, which surprised me. And I trusted in giving the information to you that it would come to light immediately.
You told me on June the 14th, and we discussed this at a subsequent council meeting. It was brought to the attention of the city manager. We spoke about it in an executive, and we gave the city manager the authority to investigate this. You told me on June the 14th is when you told me.
Yes, sir.
Daniel, you want to answer any of these?
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question of Ms. Farmer?
Yes, you may.
Because I too have every council meeting minutes for the past 5.5 years, okay? But my question to you, Ms. Farmer, is if you did see alterations or deletions or whatever modifications, did you find what it was that was changed? Did
All I have,
You've got the old, you got the.
no, I don't, I have the old, and what had been modified prior to, and I can explain that. I took my computer down to, Steve's not in here, IT, the IT department, because I was having some problems. And what Steve did is he loaded my computer, re-upped everything that had transpired from that time. So that changed any document in there, and that's where I got the dates modified, okay?
So you don't have the old minutes, so to compare with the,
No.
what you're alleging
No.
has been modified?
Ms. Ramirez, you do have the old minutes,
That's right.
and you do have the modified minutes. And it's just a matter of looking at both of them and determining what the modification was.
I do not have the modified minutes. I just have my original file.
Well, she has the modified, and you have the original. So we ought to be able to put both of them together.
That's not what I said. I said at the bottom, I'll stop and if you can take a look at it, you can go to, pick a date, and when the bottom, when it comes up, it shows the date of the original minutes. And then it slides over here at the bottom and it says date and time modified. And that's where you get the newer dates
Who is he?
and the time of day.
Is there any way that we have the original and the modified that we can compare?
I can pull my folder, which is the original, and I'll have the date that it was created as well as any modification date.
Please do that and bring that to us so that we have this. I want to see what the modifications are as well.
That's what I want to see.
I want to see the
Because I've got
modifications.
the
If it was grammatical or if it was punctuation, then I want to know that it was punctuation or grammatical. If it was a sentence or something changed, I want to know that as well. So pull the old, pull the modified, and let's compare it, please, ma'am.
Mr. Mayor, and
Yes,
my laptop, since we're one of the three most senior, it hadn't been to IT, so what I've got is the original also, so just keep that in mind.
This ought to be real easy to figure out.
Sure, sure.
And if there's been a modification, we'll know what the modification is. Daniel, you want to continue, sir?
Sure. I do want to mention, Ms. Farmer did say that she didn't put this project or anything like that. In her memo that she sent out, she did mention that she approached me on February 7th, 2013 for project progress, and that's what I was referring to. As far as all the times Ms. Farmer came in my office, I had multiple meetings every day. At times, the ones that do have recorded that are scheduled are the ones that I know for sure that these are the days that we had. At times when Ms. Farmer comes in, or anyone for that matter, I don't immediately document the day that individual came in and talked to me. I go by your notes also, Ms. Farmer, that you mentioned that you asked for progress, that report on the project on February 7th. As far as, I'm sorry?
June 20th?
No, ma'am, on February 7th. Okay, it's in your notes, that's what you wrote down. As far as the not being handed or giving you the information that you're requesting as far as invoices and so forth, the only concern that we had expressed, I know you had gone to Mr. Dane also, is just because the confidential nature of the agreement that we have with the other two cities is just to review the information there at City Hall, not to take it home with you.
I didn't ask to take it.
Okay, then you had access to it at any time then. At that point, we had the files there, you could have reviewed it at any time. If it wasn't about taking it home, why not review it there then?
I asked Mr. Dane to put me in a corner somewhere in a well-lit office one day when he was interviewing Ms. Terrell. And that was on July 3rd, I believe it was. And I was told I couldn't have the files. I told him then, I wasn't interested in taking them out of the building.
That is not how I recall the conversation. You wanted copies, or you wanted to be able to take the documents with you. And we actually shared those documents for another council member to look at before that July date. Another council member had the same request, and they had the opportunity to review the documents. But they weren't insisting on taking the documents. They simply wanted to look at them in City Hall, and they had that opportunity.
Mr. Dane, that is categorically not true. I never asked to take the documents.
No, that is true. I came in on June the 27th, my orientation meeting. I asked for the same documents you're talking about, every one of them. Within 4 days, I came into that orientation meeting, the very first meeting I sat with 2 other council members, and every document was presented to me. I was asked not to take any documents out of there because it was confidential, and that did happen, and that was before
No,
July.
I'm not saying your deal with him didn't happen. I'm saying I
It's
didn't.
before you are claiming that you didn't get to look at them. That was before you claimed that.
That's right. I didn't get to see him until August.
I don't believe you.
Well, Mr. Fleming, it was in the audit committee meeting, and there were numerous outside auditing firm people there that it was asked in front of. And Mr. Dane admitted that I didn't have her. And he went up at that time, when they asked him why, he went and got the minutes of the package, the file, and that's the first time that I ever got to look at them.
Should I respond?
Yes, sir, please.
When you brought it up in the audit committee meeting, I told you that the documents had been available for in excess of a month, and that they were immediately available and sitting on my desk as we spoke. And as your written statement indicates, after that audit committee, we went through the documents together.
That's right.
So how could I say that they were not available, and then 30 minutes later, we're going through?
July 3rd is when you told me that they weren't available. August 9th, I believe it was, if I could look at it, is the date of the audit committee meeting.
July 3rd, that same file was sitting on my desk. It's the same file that another council member just said that he looked at.
On June 27th. Dwayne?
Yes, sir.
Can I say
Yes,
something?
Mr. Fleming.
Okay, a couple things I want to talk about. One, on the executive meetings, this last meeting, before we left that first executive meeting, Dwayne asked you and Winky specifically if we needed to come back to the second meeting and discuss the rest of the items that we talked about. And you said,
I said, for what?
no, ma'am. You said yes. You said yes. And there are other members here that everybody who was here. Both of y'all said that we were not through. Let me talk. We were not through discussing what was going on and what was going to happen. Then, and I want to, since you're so honest and everything's out in the open, someone saw you leaving before you went to that second executive meeting, and you said, I don't want to go back to that second executive meeting because I don't want to be yelled at. That's what you said to this person.
Exactly.
You did.
And you were part
So
of it.
you're trying to turn this all around to where this is, I'm not going to go to the meeting because they're doing something illegal. We weren't doing anything illegal in that meeting. We already had that meeting in the first meeting, and we were coming back for the second meeting to finish it up. We did nothing illegal in those meetings. Nothing at all. And if you would have been at that meeting, which was called for your benefit, you would have known what we had discussed and what we were going to discuss at this meeting. I don't want you coming off as the savior on all this thing. We all knew, and the most important thing that we need to get through to everybody on this, to Midland and to Abilene, is the water partnership. We are in a partnership with those two cities, and water is the most important thing with this, and we're talking about these things like we want to get out of this partnership. We don't want out of that partnership, and I don't think you have the majority of the vote up here to get out of that partnership, to stop that partnership. You yourself have said you want to keep it going. We need to just keep moving forward on this. I agree, they did mess up on making the payments. The payments should not have been made. He explained that to us in the second executive meeting that you did not attend because you didn't want to be yelled at. And we went on. The next thing, when you went to the press, reading out of your book there, this is a body. This is a body. And you went to the press, and you did not send me a letter. You did not tell me what you found. I don't believe you told Marty. I know several. I never got a letter from you.
I can't share more than 2 people.
A letter? Yes, you can. You shared it with 100,000 people. You sent that letter to every person out here. I should have gotten that letter. If we're acting ethically, then you should have explained to me what you were going to do out there. It embarrassed the heck out of me. I had no idea what you were doing. You went on this other press thing. You did 2 interviews out there without telling us what you were going to do. I think that was an ethical violation on your part, and I think you let some information out that you shouldn't have let go, and you can be brought up on some charges. That's my opinion.
At least I'm not having meetings with just 4 people.
With just 4 people. I have no idea what you're talking about there.
Mr. Mayor?
As far, I'm still speaking. As far as the next thing, in that first executive meeting that you were present for, and Winky said a while ago he knew nothing about this, that's not true. They did explain to us about the possibility of the $3 million, and it's not a possibility, it's gonna happen. It's gonna be about $3 million. And in order for us to get water, it's gonna cost us a lot of money, and we really need to be focused on getting the water. We have to spend these studies, we have to do these tests, and we have to get water. San Angelo is gonna die. People do not even understand how bad our water situation is, and they need to understand that. We need to not be fighting over $280-something. We need to be fighting for $3 million to get on with this study and get moving on down the road. That's what we need to be doing.
Mr. Mayor, when he's through, you through, Rodney?
Is anybody else? We take this one at a time. Everyone gets to talk, then we'll come back around. I've not heard anything from Mr. Vardaman, Mr. Self, or Mr. Silvas. Do y'all have anything to say?
I just want to add.
Let's see, you have spoken. Mr. Self, or you? Mr. Vardaman, you have anything? Okay, we can start over again. We'll start over you, Andy.
Well, I don't know if Rodney's through.
Go ahead. I'm sure I'm probably gonna say something after you're done.
Okay. I disagree with some of the things you said, Rodney. I don't think there's any need to get into a personality conflict right here. But you said that I didn't tell you the truth when I didn't know anything about this phase 2. I found out about phase 2, to the best of my recollection, at the last city council meeting in executive session.
Yeah, that's what I said. That's what
I was saying. You
No, you said you didn't know anything about it.
I think we need to
until
move on.
recently is what I meant.
I think we need to move on, and I will entertain a motion, one way or the other, that we pay the contract that we owe, the contract that we signed, the contract that we authorized Harold Dominguez to sign, and the contract that we have with Abilene and Midland. I will entertain a motion at this time to pay this according to the contract that we signed. Is anyone willing to make it?
I'll make it. I'll move that we move forward with this item number 13 the way it is. But having said that, and this is where I'll give Charlotte credit, because she and I remember that we had been asking and asking on the progress of this contract, and which is true. And part of it, I take blame for it. Because we should have been a little bit more adamant about it. But moving forward, I agree. We need transparency. We need to hear from you guys as to what step, where we're at on this contract. So, having said that, I will move forward with it. But again, with stipulation that, hey, whatever dollar amount is spent from now on, from today on, we need to know.
I also will take my portion of the blame here, because I also was on the council in April when we approved this, April of 11. I also voted for these. And I also did not notice the $100,000 threshold. I'm at blame as well on this. I take it, I apologize. I forgot it, our manager forgot it, our water director forgot it, our mayor forgot it. It was forgotten, it fell through the cracks. It was not a cover-up, it was a very stupid mistake, of which I accept my third of the responsibility. Johnny, I would ask you in your motion, if you would make the motion in these words, just like it is in item 13. Consideration of authorizing funding and payment for city proportionate share of cost incurred for services pursuant to the interlocal agreement between the cities of Abilene, Midland, and San Angelo effective April 9, 2011, West Texas Partnership, and consideration of ratifying all actions already taken and payments made pursuant to said interlocal agreement since its effective date and any action in connection thereto. Will you make that in the form of a motion?
Yes, I will, but I also want to add that we get a quarterly update of all this.
And that is good. Will it be added to that motion?
May I ask?
Will anyone second
I will
this
second
motion?
that.
Are you going to designate which fund where the money comes from to pay for, to reimburse the water fund?
Michael?
Mayor, in the interest of full disclosure, what staff would propose is phase 1 amounts of approximately $262,540. That exceeds the amount that's been discussed so far. There are 2 months worth of invoices that we're anticipating receiving soon associated with phase 1. For phase 2, Mr. Dixon has worked up an estimate to participate in phase 2, which is estimated to span 12 to 15 months. and includes some specifics that we'll get into when we're allowed to discuss confidential matters. His estimate for that amount over that time period would be approximately $1,016,783. And at this point, our portion, yeah, I'm sorry, very good point. These are our portions. And at this point, we think it'd be appropriate to direct staff to seek reimbursement from COSA DC from those funds. We do propose that the city remain in that loop. The city is the party to the agreement. The city should remit the check. That also keeps those documents in the city's files where they can remain confidential in accordance with our attorney's opinion and the provisions in the contract. And we'll seek reimbursement from COSA DC for those monies. And we'll have to work out the details associated with that. And then Mr. Silvas, Mr. Valenzuela was also talking about some sort of quarterly reporting mechanism, both from a financial standpoint and from a project progress standpoint. So a full approval of everything that's possible in 13 would include the 262 for phase 1, which is somewhat the backward looking back, ratifying and approving. And it sets the funding level for phase 2 at that $1,016,000, and it directs staff to seek reimbursements from COSA DC and to develop a quarterly reporting system for council.
I would ask Johnny if you would also modify your motion to say that this includes phase 1 only. And after we deal with phase 1, we will come back and deal with phase 2, so that everything is kept completely, totally separate. Will you modify that?
Yeah, Ms. Ramirez, of course you heard that I will also include in that phase 1 only the amount of $262,540. Add that to my motion.
With quarterly reports. The motion has been made, it has been seconded.
I just want to clarify the motion, please.
You may.
Are we clear as to what we're getting for this investment? I mean, as it was so far, there's no water. I mean, we're not getting any water. Is it clear where we get water from here? Is it going to be the Cedar Ridge that's above Abilene? I mean,
Ms. Farmer, I wish that you would quit divulging confidential information. This is confidential information. It has been spoken of about only in executive. We have a confidential arrangement with Abilene and Midland that we will speak of these things only in confidential settings. And when you start bringing about all of these different areas that we have looked at for water, you are destroying the confidentiality.
No, sir, it's been in the newspapers. It's not confidential. It's already out there.
It is confidential for us as a board because we have an agreement with Abilene and Midland that we will hold these things confidential until we as a board decide with a majority of this board to allow this to be sent to the public. That is our agreement, that is your agreement, and it is not public knowledge. It is confidential and it must be kept confidential. And I would ask you to stop divulging confidential information that this board has not with the majority approved.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to move that Mr. Silvas's motion revert back pretty much to what you made it initially. And
Turn your microphone on. You turn the microphone on, please.
It's on.
Okay.
Move to modify Mr. Silvas's motion back more in the nature of what yours was, which is deleting the part about ratifying all actions already taken.
Mr. Silvas, do you wish to modify or do you wish to keep it as you made it?
I will keep it as it is.
Okay, the motion has been made, it has been seconded, and it will not be modified. It is now time for public comment. I'm going to ask you to hold this 5 minutes because it's 10:44 and I'm giving the knee break. So if you have any public